Before we dig in, a quick thank you to the sponsors ready to grow with the Soil Sisters. Tejas Tonic is the official beverage of the Texas Soil Sisters. We especially love that the hemp for Tejas Tonic is organically farmed in the Texas Hill Country, with farms in both Dripping Springs and Lukenbach, Texas. The Soil Sisters podcast is powered by B&P Electric. Whether you're building, remodeling, installing low-voltage landscape lighting, or in need of an inspection, B&P is your Central Texas electrical contractor. Find links to our sponsors in the podcast show notes or head over to txsoilsisters.co. You're listening to the Soil Sisters podcast, where we dig in on family farming and ranching, regenerative agriculture, healthy living, and planting seeds in our community. We invite you to listen, subscribe, and grow with the Soil Sisters. Hi, y'all. I'm Joanna Newting, joined by my blood, soul, and soil sister Crystal at the Southern Family Farmers and Food Systems Conference at Texas State University. And we are excited to welcome Jessi Roesch to the stage.
Thanks for having me, Soil Sisters.
Yay.
I'm so excited to be here.
Welcome. We're so happy to have you. Yes. Yeah.
Yes. We met lobbying for the Farm and Ranch Freedom Alliance this session.
Yes.
And we learned about what you're doing as founder and CEO of Downland. And so, yes, this conversation is a long time coming.
Yeah, we definitely have succession planning issues in our family. Who knows what we're doing? Nobody knows what we're doing.
Who doesn't?
So,
Yeah, so much. So Downland is helping young farmers prepare for farm ownership while also helping retiring farmers kind of get a hold on what are their goals and what does the future look like. So you are touching at the intersection of two very important aspects of farming. So I'm definitely wanted to get into everything that you're doing, but I think the most important place to start is with the retiring farmers, because they're the ones that own the land.
Yep.
They're the ones that are currently in control. So let's start there.
Yeah. And I think there's so many aspects to this challenge when we think about not just farmland, but generational wealth transfer, the tsunami of aging baby boomers and all their assets moving to the next generation. They're all going to face this problem. And it's really a three-part solution when I think about what do you need to pass your land, your assets, your business down to the next generation. You need a successor who's ready. You need an incumbent who can find them if they're not already in your family. And you need a way for those folks to transact in a legally and financially sound way. And actually, that last part is the easiest. The
right.
finding each other
Yes.
and making that plan from a place of values, from a place of perspective, is where that conversation really needs to start. You can ring up a whole lot of attorney bills if you're just churning on that piece while the meter's running at the attorney's office.
Yep.
And you need to have those conversations and have that mindset in that process.
Yeah.
The execution is easy. The people part, in my opinion, is the fun part and the place where we're excited to be working.
It's difficult to find the pool of people. Like being a good matchmaker, it's intuitive. And we can see people that it's like, oh my gosh, this is a great piece of land. This type of person would be great for it, but where is that person?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, and I think sometimes I'll describe the way I think about that as job board meets dating app.
Amen.
Because there's an aspect of, from the young farmer's perspective, is this land in a place I want to live? Is it a size that meets my goals, those sorts of things? But there's this compatibility component that I think is important to address. And to even back up further, you don't get permission to have that conversation in the first place if you aren't getting to know the people side. And so it's a really important aspect of getting those people involved in the conversation when you're mindful of who they are, I'll use the word value, identity, goals, all those sort of ball up in like, what does this person really want and why do they want it?
Yeah.
And can they articulate that? And how that's a place where Downland can be really helpful in helping pull those pieces out and making all this kind of admin and businessy steps of those things a lot easier.
Yeah.
So what are you finding are the barriers to succession planning that some of these older farmers that you're working with are bringing to you?
Yeah, and I'll get a little academic in my answer, but I think it gives us a framework for why people face the challenges they face, and I hear the stories that I hear. And so terror management theory is this communication theory that tells us that we want to avoid fear at all costs. Death is a pretty fear-inducing topic for a lot of people.
Yep.
And as humans, we protect ourselves from that fear by giving ourselves an identity. And that takes a whole bunch of different forms. You know, when you think about the idea of religion or an afterlife, that kind of thought process can insulate you from that fear. Being part of a group, whether that's a family group, an organization, an association, formal or informal, those identities are the thing that give life meaning, and in that meaning protect us from that fear.
Right.
We also find that when we are faced against that fear, we entrench in those identities really solidly.
Yep.
And to an extent to where that can make it hard to penetrate having that conversation in the first place. If you're skipping the like warm up steps of that conversation, if you're jumping into like, hey, we need to have a hard conversation about a hard topic. And if that's where your starting point is, and maybe amongst your family, you have that comfort that you can skip the niceties. You know, when I think about the conversations that we have when we're just getting to know people, we're taking them through that conversation flow and understanding who they are so they can make decisions from that place. But if you jump ahead, you're really missing an opportunity for both understanding the person you're listening to, aligning the decisions they make with that identity, or skipping all of that and immediately jumping into a fight. And I think that's where you can go wrong really quickly if you don't understand that grip for folks is truly coming from a place of fear.
Yeah.
And I think having some compassion for that can be really helpful in navigating these conversations.
Well, I love what you're saying because it's very important. People don't put dots together. They don't understand their own selves and their own fears and their own worries. And so for you to be able to just talk them through that and like light some parts up in their brain and help them to see things in a different way that allows them to make better decisions for their own long term, you know, their life, their land, and all that kind of stuff.
Because the plan that they're making fits who they are, who they want to be, and how they see themselves. And people can kind of get shoehorned into thinking they're doing the right thing from a numbers perspective, and that's not a factor. Like, people should talk about money and build that comfort as part of these processes as well.
Right.
And even a fear of talking about money or maybe talking about debt can be wrapped up in that identity a little bit of like, well, if I'm someone who takes care of my business, but I have debt, maybe I feel a little uncomfortable.
And I don't want to share that information.
And I think a lot of boomers, that was the thing that they taught their children. We don't talk about religion. We don't talk about money. We don't talk about politics. And these are three things that we very much need to be talking about.
100%.
Yeah.
There is this existential problem that we all went through when we survived the pandemic. We had this global look at death. We had this global look at disease, this thing we didn't understand that was really fear-inducing. And in response to that, a lot of people really held into their identities in an even more entrenched way.
Yeah.
And everyone in society had that experience more or less. And so we've come to this place where we've siloed ourselves out of that fear, and we need to peel those layers back a little bit.
Well, and as y'all were talking about the values piece, you know, it's all very present, but you're needing this aging farmer to be thinking about, what is the legacy I want to leave? What is the next phase of this land or this farm? What do I want that to be? Because the problem that I see is that it is very much, these are my values, this is what I think, this is what we're doing, but you're trying to think the next step ahead. So we need you to then take out the right now piece and put on the I'm gone. Pretend I'm out of the equation. Now what do I want this to look like?
Yeah.
And I think that's where you can make that a really hope-filled conversation coming from the right place. Donald Miller has a book called Building a Story Brand, and he talks a lot about this idea of your customer as your hero. And he uses tons of really fun examples from fiction and from film of the great heroes of those types of generations. And Donald Miller, in Building a Story Brand, uses a lot of examples from film and fiction of heroes. Gandalf didn't come to Frodo and say, hey man, I got some cool magic tricks to show you. And because I have cool magic tricks, you should go on this really tough journey. He was like, you are meant to be a hero, and I'm going to help you be the hero of this story. And how do we take farmers on that same journey?
Yeah.
You are the hero of this land. How do we continue that on and make that an exciting thing to talk about and think about?
I love that. I love that. And that has been something that we've really tried to stress to our dad. You've done a great job. And just because we don't want to do it exactly like you're doing it, it doesn't take away from what you have done with this land. And so helping them to understand that being a hero isn't just what they've done, but how they allow it to move forward in their absence. That's very powerful. And these are dots that someone in that position cannot come to always on their own.
Yeah. And we talk a lot about this even within my family. My husband's mom is going through a terminal diagnosis right now. And so we're having some of these conversations about, what does the family look like? How do we stay connected as a family? And there's an imminent need for us to have these conversations.
Yeah.
But there is also this dynamic of, my husband is the youngest of three. He's got a pretty big age gap. A prophet is never welcome in his hometown. And we run into that a lot. And so having tools to have that conversation, whether it's within a family or with your CPA, with your banker, with these objective third parties, they can make us talk like grown-ups a little bit more. My husband wags his finger at me because when I go home, which I'm planning to do very soon, I devolve into my teenage self a little bit. And I'm thankful I have a partner who can call me out on that.
Yeah.
And I know that if I need to deliver a message to my parents, for example, he's the one who's going to have a conversation with them, because it's going to come across a little bit different, because he's a professional grown-up.
Yeah.
That you have to use complete sentences with.
Yeah. Well, and it's important to know that about ourselves.
Exactly.
So congratulations.
Self-awareness is the key to life. Like, if you understand who you are and why you do what you do, then you can always make a better choice.
Right.
So what are some of the common pitfalls with the families or the financial, the legal? Like, what are some of these problems that you see that, you know, we just want to go ahead and wave the flag so people are aware of them?
Yeah, I think we've talked a lot about this value alignment, and can we have the conversation from that place? Once you start to get into the conversation, some of the things that can become sticking points or things to watch out for as you have the opportunity to have these conversation can include, do you understand where all your assets are? Do you have them in a ugly legal pad somewhere? Do you know how to access that information from your banker, from your CPA, maybe from public data, depending on where you live? And all of that information can be really spread out. I see a lot of data. I spent some years in equipment finance and pulled some data on equipment ownership across the country, which is public in many, many places. The agricultural equipment, a good chunk of it, probably getting up close to half of it, though this is old data, is in the names of individual people rather than businesses or LLCs. And I'm certainly not an attorney or a tax provider. There are reasons to make those decisions and structure that in that way. But for my time as a banker, I raise an eyebrow a little bit. And I think that's a signal to me that people possibly have their assets either across multiple entities or in no entity at all. And so how do you keep track of those along the way? And making sure that other people who are going to be involved in that planning process, whether it's within your family or beyond, can hang on to that for you. I think some of the other pitfalls that I run into are that same awareness on the financial side. Do you know all the loans that you have outstanding? Yeah. Do you know how much you owe on that? And are you brave enough to look at that and have a really honest assessment of, based on any debt that I have, perhaps, how does that factor into the way I think about my goals for my farm long term? And again, all of that really gets into the more administrative part of this process. Yeah. That is not the part that should intimidate people. Right. I think if we've gotten to a place where you know who you are and why you're making this plan, because you want to keep your land the way it's always been, or because it's been in your family for these number of generations, it's from that hope that we can take some hard steps to call our banker, for example. And I think there's places that and tools that can and will be built, both from the work that we're doing and other folks in the industry, to make all those things much easier.
Well, and the other piece of that too, financially, is how is your money set up? Do you have a trust? Because the amount of money that our family has spent on inheritance taxes,
$750,000.
My dad, from the moment he became in charge of our family operation, he was digging us out of debt to the government. And it had been a successful, profitable operation unto that point.
Up until that moment. And that was in the 80s, like 1980.
And I think there's a lot of different structures that, one of the reasons that I got into this business is because as a teenager, I was a caretaker for sick family members. I saw people's autonomy and choice being taken away, navigating the healthcare system while also navigating the challenges of dealing with a health issue. I've seen that same thing as a banker and in financial services that are both intimidating topics for a lot of people. There's intentionally a lot of jargon that makes it very confusing. And the people who are supposed to be experts to help you don't have a lot of time or tools or incentives to help educate you. And that's why it's really helpful to have people in your corner who can provide some of that advice and really listen and understand. Because if you just show up to the attorney's office and you're like, well, it's time to pass it down, he's going to give you the easy thing to do. And it's
that
just
needs
because
to be
an
figured
attorney
out.
is in a suit doesn't mean they are the right one for you.
Yeah, it's kind of like a doctor. Just because they have a white coat doesn't mean I should trust them as the end-all be-all.
Well, and those are decisions you need to have already made before you even see that attorney. Because, they charge you by the 15-minute. And if you're sitting around hemming and hawing, making decisions, you are wasting money.
So those are some pitfalls. What do you think the biggest one is?
I think it's, are you willing to have the conversation? And I think that's where Downland is really leaning into the people side of this equation. Getting a farmer to go to the attorney's office, go to the CPA, that's like getting a toddler to eat broccoli. No one wants to do that. I don't want to do that. And it's kind of my job. And so, one, how can we meet people in the places they already are and start to incrementally have these conversations in the ways and places that people like to talk. I mean, if I get a phone call from a farmer, I know I need to cancel my next meeting because I've got a 45-minute, hour and a half conversation ahead of me. And we're at an interesting point in time, technology-wise, where I don't think AI should have these conversations right now, but how can we use voice co-pilots, voice tools to help interact with people who like to talk on the phone? How can we use text messages, these really low-tech, accessible ways to bite off, 2 or 3 questions that you need to answer here and there to have that conversation and make some of those decisions. And even just within yourself, if I'm in my combine, if I'm out in the field, I got a podcast playing in my ear, what are the 2 or 3 questions that are rattling around in the back of my mind so that I can be prepared when I ask myself or get asked these hard questions. And I think, again, if you've come back to that place of values, I'm willing to spend the social capital to have a hard conversation with whoever I've decided is going to be part of that conversation. If I know that I'm brave, if I know that I care about keeping my land, if I know that I want to conserve it, whatever that is for that farmer, that's the thing that's paramount. And that's the thing that I need to be willing to anchor to so I can have the hard conversation and kind of come back to that.
Well, and it's something we talked about with Chris Vandenberg at Vetted Farms. It's just taking the baby step. So if it is nudging them with one question on a text message, and like maybe the next week it's one more question, and it's just letting them think of one thing at a time to then start bringing the picture into focus.
And I think that's where, if you're showing up at your banker's office, your CPA's office, your attorney's office, and that's the first time you're muddling on some of these questions, it's a lot to just decide, and you're in this sort of pressure situation. We find that with survey data, people really drop off after 6-ish questions. Like if you have a 40-question survey, you're running out of cognitive space real quick on that. And again, so how can we help prompt people in the places they're at, in the ways they like to do work, with the people that they choose they want to be involved in that process, and go from there.
I love that, because you're listening in a way that they don't know how. And so you're hearing the words they're saying and being like, okay, there's your value. And it takes somebody who can do that around. This is how valuable community is. Everyone has skills, and this is where you're tuned in and you know what you're listening for. And so then you can support them and ask them questions that are leading to that, that value, that goal.
And we're thinking about how can we create those tools for more people, because someone is having this conversation, whether it's the family, the banker, the attorney, whoever.
Right.
And that's the fun part, is as I get to hear farmers talk about the things that they want, I get to point out the best things about them back to them.
Yes.
That is affirming. That is a conversation I want to have.
Yes.
If I'm brave, if I'm strong, if I'm independent, if I have those values, and someone's pointing that out to me, one, that just feels good. I got chills just sitting here because I like to think of myself as some of those things.
You are.
And therefore, okay, all right, you're brave. Let's have a hard conversation. And if you don't want to, that's okay too. So both the autonomy to participate while seeing the person for who they are makes that way more exciting and less daunting.
Yeah. And I'll just say, this is so regenerative. You know what I'm saying? Regenerative is supporting life. And you are supporting the life force of this older farmer who has done all that they have done. And now it's time to bring in that last crop, you know what I'm saying? And just do it as good as you can. And this is regenerative. This is the energy. This is the way, the movement, and how we're going. It's just like, of course.
Yes.
And I so appreciate that y'all are out there and doing this, and just people hearing this kind of stuff is going to help put those dots together.
And yes, that fear is the first reason people don't want to have the conversation. And like, let's change it from a fear-based question, get off that terror management train and get on that life train. Here we go.
Yep.
Okay, so we've kind of been answering this question, but for someone who's like, okay, I hear you, I know I need help. What is Downland's role in the succession planning process? Like, what are you doing so that we can kind of bring this together for these older farmers?
When I spoke earlier about those 3 things that you need to pass a business down, we're really building our product roadmap around those 3 things. And I'm going to put my like startup nerd hat on probably as I talk through some of this. But from the young farmer's perspective, sort of the sequencing side, how do you know you're ready? One of the first ways we're thinking about that is how do we frame that person's readiness around the USDA beginning farm loan program. It has you do some kind of administrative stuff, like you need an LLC, you need a business bank account, you probably need to start saving up some money.
You have to have a farm number.
Yep.
You need your farm number, you need continuing education tracking. And so that is a multi-year process, particularly when we're thinking about that loan readiness. I talked about my time in banking, and having that long-term view is really important. So whether you're an aspiring hobby farmer, homesteader, or this is your career, getting those steps started is an important first thing to do when you're getting ready. And so once that person is ready, how do we help them find what they need? And I mentioned that job board meets dating app. So we'll be building that kind of connectivity piece, not just jobs that people can have, farm management opportunities, short-term and long-term groups. A lot of what we've done to date is helping people find some of that short-term farm work. And that's been a way for us to test. Can we find these old farmers? Can we find young farmers? Can we put them together? That's the baseline of where we started. And now we're building some better ways for them to connect. And then when we think about that final step, that third step of transacting, that's where we're building in that voice conversation. How can I take a conversation and turn that into a contract? Starting with simple things like land leases and wills, and working up to more complex legal arrangements like trusts or seller financing. And so that's where we'll be sequencing as we start to build. If you go to our website today, you'll find a wait list that you can jump on to get started.
And that's godownland.com. So you have a waiting list for the aspiring young farmers, but do you also have a waiting list for the existing retiring farmers?
That depends when you go to my website today and when this comes out.
Because, you know, I'm like, we have to have those old farmers. Yes. We have to be preparing the aspiring young farmers at the same time. So we're spinning a lot of plates in hopes that everybody's understanding and that we'll be able to join hands with the right people. So, you know, Crystal and I do a lot of this in our own way. People organically find our website and, you know, they're looking up regenerative agriculture in Texas. And so we have people that we're collecting that are like, I have 35 acres here. My family has 200 acres here. And actually, we just did
farm consult.
We did a farm consult and then present, here are the options we see for you. And we, of course, included Downland as an option for their family because they want to keep it, they want to do something, but there's no one in their family that actually wants to do the physical work.
And I think as we systematize these types of things, there are better ways to do that more cohesively within communities or regions, both understanding like, where's your processor? Like if you say you want to raise chickens, you better be ready to maybe make a long drive depending on where you're at, or make sure you're located in proximity to some of the other things that you'll need in that operation. And so as we sort of zoom out on this map, we think about finding some of those groups through some of these collective coalitions, associations, events, Veterans groups are really doing a lot of work to get veterans on farmland. I think it's a real opportunity here. And so how do we start to think about what do those agricultural communities look like? And that comes back to your regenerative point, because there is a lot of shared infrastructure, equipment, processing, market, all of these things start to like weave together if we want to have a thriving agricultural community that's providing jobs for people and a lifestyle for people that they want.
I also read on your website that you're helping these aspiring farmers get to where they need to be. So what are you doing to support these farmers? What are some of these programs?
Yeah. And I think about Downland as a connector with regard to the young farmer. How do we put them on a track to take some of those steps, know what those steps are? When I talk to a young farmer, the conversation is, when I talk to a young farmer, whether this is their career or a hobby farm or a homestead, the first question is, what do I do first? What do I do first? And that's where some of that framing around qualifying for some of these programs can be really helpful. You need to have a business. You need a business plan. You need to start educating yourself, and you need to track those things over time. So that's really how we think about helping people from that spark of interest and excitement. What's the first thing you're going to do? And not just sort of keep scrolling on your Instagram on idyllic farm pictures. Like, if you really want to take some steps, how are some places you can do it? And I think that's a really exciting way, when I think about the need for tracking continuing education, for example, that we can start to bring more components of that community together. And I'm not a farmer. I don't pretend to be. The cornfield in my backyard was not mine, but it was great for hide and seek and worrying my parents sick about where I was. But that doesn't qualify me for a whole lot else.
Yeah.
There's a lot of really excellent people who are teaching and educating in this space. And I think as we help people qualify for that first baseline program, how do we start to layer some other steps alongside that readiness, particularly as they start to accumulate some savings? There's lots of grant matching programs, state level programs, veteran specific programs, for example. And how do we start to make people aware of the resources that are out there and know that they've been preparing 2, 3, 5 years in the past, so that as those opportunities come up, they're not on the back foot.
Amen.
One of the things that I hear that I want to make sure that is being relayed is, you don't wait until you have the land to create the plan.
Correct.
You are envisioning what you want. You are building out on paper. You're building out a business plan, and put in how many acres you want it to be. Ideally, it's like you are filling out your dating profile of what your perfect match is.
Yep.
Like, what do I want? I'm going to raise chickens. I'm going to have bees. I'm going to amp graze sheep. Put it all out. Create the vision. And this gives you everything you need to find their perfect match, so that they will then have the land to do the thing.
And I think there can be an assumption that if I want to be a farmer or a landowner, I need a pile of millions of dollars or I can't start. And that's not true. You don't need to be a millionaire. You need to have a plan.
Yes.
And that's a much more approachable place to start for people. And there's plenty of millionaires out there who have not had a plan either. And they also don't have a farm that's working so well. I hear a lot of those stories too. You know, the money you can sort of pour in is not fruitful without a plan.
Yep.
And so not deviating from that step is super important, and can make you actually way more effective in understanding what you want over time. I have found this in my experience as a founder, that founders are quite similar to farmers in that we are business owners. We have a lot of passion for the things that we do and are building. And I have been learning as someone who has an operations background, who like in my early 20s, I got up and I had a team of 25 people answering telephone calls at a bank. We had to do phone call widgets all day. We had to do 60 of them an hour per person. Like that is a very specific time domain in which I'm measuring the success of my job. And as an ops person by trade, becoming a founder and business owner over the last 4+ years, I start to zoom out my view of how do I plan in weeks and months and quarters and years for the things that I want to come to fruition. And farmers, founders, anyone who aspires to be a business owner would benefit from making sure that that reflection on those time domains is part of their routine and can make them feel like they're actually making progress. Like if you decided you wanted to be a farmer yesterday and you woke up today and you aren't, you're pretty disappointed you didn't make a whole lot of progress, but you had really bad expectations.
Yeah.
Well, and the planning part is what is so important because it gives you the tools when it comes to get the stuff done. Because if you've done no planning, then you're wasting money, you're wasting time, you're wasting energy, and you're not getting anything done. But if you've spent the time up front and you've thought about it, and this is conscious creation as a consciousness coach, I teach people, you focus on what you want and move in that direction. And so by just planning and putting these things down on paper, you're doing such a huge part of the work. The universe and, is always conspiring to give us what we need and want. And so you're literally putting your ideas down and focusing on them and giving the energy to that instead of all the problems is moving you along further than you could ever imagine.
Yes. And I have to remind myself as an ops person, because when I talk to other folks, I see all the work that needs done in my business. A farmer walks out and see all the work that needs done in the field, the scattered, broken parts of equipment and hoses and all kinds of stuff that can just be on your to-do list. But is it on your to-do list to get you to that next goal, to get you to that next thing? Like, what is the purpose in it?
So I want to clear something up. As we're talking about matchmaking landowners with aspiring young farmers. There's probably a lot of different ways that this can end up looking, but we have back in the day when people were sharecroppers, they worked the land, they didn't own the land. So, is it a sharecropping type situation where we're hopefully making it to where it's a lot more equitable in how people make money? Is it, a landowner that is like, okay, my own family doesn't want to do this, so this person is like, lease to own, so to speak? Like, what are some of these different scenarios, how this can look?
Yeah, and I think there is a huge opportunity in this space for more creative financial solutions to land transition. Lease to own, I think, is a really good option. I think seller financing is super low hanging fruit within this space. And seller financing is simply a negotiation between the owner of a property and the person who's going to be buying it. So instead of us going to a bank where the bank decides if I have enough money to buy this property, I negotiate that with the seller. And that is a way that people can have that conversation together and remove some of these third parties that can make that really onerous and challenging. Right. I talk a lot to people whose point of view is that large farmland is the only way to go and scale is the only way to succeed in farming. I think that's a fun happy hour conversation to have, and totally misses the fact that we can subdivide land. Don't act like we haven't before. And so I think there can be more accessible, more creative ways to make farming accessible, whether that is through ownership, ideally through business ownership, and through land ownership over time is some of the biggest opportunity there. And if we can have that conversation, we can make the plan. There's like a half dozen kind of different items that might come up if you're leasing your land, if you're keeping it in a trust, if you're getting a conservation easement on it. There's really a small handful of options. The question that really comes on what's going on, the legal forms, is who's involved and what are they paying.
Right.
And if we can come to an agreement on that, then a lot of the rest of it can be pretty easy. And I think, how do we start to have more of those conversations between people and empower people in a way that these institutions have started to treat us like widgets that we're moving through their process.
Yep.
And when we're thinking about solutions for, these existing aging out of the business farmers, there are so many different ways that we can monetize land. The thing that's become so popular now is these AI data centers. But when you look at the water usage on these things, it's like we have to make actual farming profitable.
Yes.
And good for the land and good for the community and good for the farmer, because we understand you have to make money. So we have to figure out how to work together and make this good for everyone and not just turn our land over to big business.
Because you can't
And
eat
I will
artificial
say,
intelligence.
I think there's a place for businesses, institutions, REITs, and other types of like larger scale values aligned folks to come into the space and play and maybe create a backstop for some of that underwriting risk that I mentioned. For example, like it will take many and more creative solutions, but the one we have now of only sell to the highest bidder is not even the option that most people want. 87% of farmers don't want to sell to a corporation. So if you are operating from that value space, would you take 70 cents on the dollar to make sure that what happens with your land is more lined up with what your vision is? There may be some trade-offs in that. There may not be, frankly. And I think there's a lot of innovation here in Central Texas about different types of crops, different types of businesses, how those are integrated with the way that people live, both from an agritourism sense and longer term. Where do value-added products fit in this mix? And again, all of that is super overwhelming, but let's come back to that plan. How do we get that first operation really solid, and how do we stack from there? How do those operations play across my community and across my region?
Yeah. Well, Jessi, is there anything that we haven't asked you thus far that you think is important to round this out and really kind of solidify in people's minds what Downland is doing for our farmers?
I love that question. Downland is ultimately a tool for people. And I hope that we can be synonymous with people thinking about these challenges and having the tools they need to be less intimidated by them and to move from this place of fear or doubt or shame into this place of, I'm a hero for this land, for my family. And because of that, I'm going to do some hard things to make decisions. And we want to be in a place where, whether that's on the tractor or in your yard or on your sofa, you can do that.
Yeah.
I like it. Now, if people want to work with you, where are y'all at the stage of taking on aspiring farmers and the retiring farmers?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're moving very quickly out of the early stage. We're fortunate to have some really values-aligned folks on our team who infused us with some capital that's helping us move really quickly. So we'll be excited within the next 6 months to debut some of the initial beta of that conversation to contract flow. If folks want to have some of those conversations with us while we're in beta, you can find us at godownland.com or find me on LinkedIn at Jessi Roesch.
All right. And that is Roesch, Jessi Roesch. Thank you for who you are and what you're doing for our community.
Thank you so much for having me, ladies.
Yes.
This was really
It
fun.
was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Connect with the Soil Sisters at txsoilsisters.co. Submit questions, guest or show ideas, and sponsorship inquiries. The Soil Sisters podcast was created and produced by Joanna Nuding. Editing and sound design are in the capable hands of the PodConnects Podcast Network.